And this is like the core editor experience. But then in the CLI, we also have cursor agent, which is the same idea, but you can use it anywhere, really. You can use this in a different editor. You could use it in your CI, anywhere you want. So I'll run this just so you can get an idea of what this looks like, but it's very similar idea. It's just a different interface for the same agentic idea of working with an AI model.
This is Lee Robinson, a legendary developer who scaled Vercel from $1 to $200 million ARR. And now he works at Cursor as the head of AI education. If you are serious about coding with AI, you have to watch this video. Who do you think is going to benefit from AI the most? Is it the junior developers or the senior guys?
So I think today, the more senior engineer benefits a bit more. But I think towards the future, it will empower people who start learning to code with AI. They're going to just develop skills in a different way than maybe the more senior engineer.
So what's like one thing you notice among the top users of AI that can use it the most efficiently that maybe beginners or like a lot of vibe coders don't do?
Yeah, there's kind of a spectrum of different AI tools that you can use for coding. It really goes to how much autonomy you want to give the AI tool or the AI agent. So in the most basic example, it's just predicting the next action that you want to take in the editor. So GitHub Copilot, made this popular, basically autocomplete for your code, right? But it's gotten better over the years. So I think the people who are farther along on that journey are kind of in the AI agent world. And they're trying to figure out the right way to put the right rules and checks in place so that the agent can write code and it's not just immediately throw away code or not actually useful. Like you have to figure out how to constrain this generator of code that will spit out things that might look correct but are not actually correct.
Yeah, one example that I've done recently is like writing front-end tests, really making sure the first 3 of them are well documented. I think this is what I noticed, is like the best users of AI put in more time up front and then can just go way faster, whereas a lot of the beginners, they just want a quick MVP, quick website, and then they maybe go in a direction that they didn't want to go in.
Yeah, and also I think in putting more time up front, there's also an understanding of what do I want to even build?
Yes.
And having more specificity. And it's not that you have to write, a book on a prompt, but you need to know the specifics of the system that you're building. And what you'll notice from more experienced engineers is they can give very precise language on the thing that they're trying to build that's going to be able to steer the AI in the right direction.
It really comes down to software design at the end of the day. If I'm like going to add a big feature with AI, I don't even want to look at the code until I have complete understanding, right? And I think that's really like staying in charge. That's the main thing.
Yeah, there's no substitute for the business requirements or like the product spec because the AI will happily generate whatever code it wants given a vague PRD or a vague document that's trying to describe what you want to build.
As we go into the age of AI coding, what do you think is going to be like the most important skill to learn and master?
Just trying to use the tools and I think critically learning where they're not very good. As the models get better, as the tools get better, you're kind of trying to push up against where the models are bad, have a very good understanding of where the current capabilities aren't good enough yet, such that when new functionality comes out, you kind of know, okay, I can go try this thing now.
Yeah, it really is like developing that taste of when to use the model, when to not use the model. People, especially like the CEOs of the AI labs, they like to hype everything up, like, within 6 months, 90% of the code or all the code is going to be written by AI. But the reality is probably somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, it's like both sides are somewhat right and both sides are somewhat wrong. Yes, AI is another tool in the tool belt that we will continue to use and get better at to help us write code better and design software better. But I think this dream or this idea that somehow it's just going to write all the code is not very realistic.
Yeah, I agree. Why do you think the CLI tools are becoming so popular? I think this is one of the most unexpected trends of this year. It's almost counterintuitive, right? Like the more minimalistic the interface. You would think that it would be some fancy UI that's becoming the way to use AI agents, but it turns out it's the terminal.
Yeah, so the reason for this is that there's a different level of autonomy that you want when working with the AI model. And for some people, they prefer to write most of the code still, and they like having the kind of autocomplete like cursor tab where it's going to help them predict the next action as they're coding, kind of staying in the flow. And for those people, they are kind of happy with editors that are like Cursor or IDEs like Cursor, or maybe bringing that experience somewhere else. Then as you kind of move up the abstraction and you allow people to use models with agents to write a lot more code, the interface for what that looks like is still kind of being figured out, the best way of doing that. And the nice thing about a CLI, and the reason why we invested in building a CLI, is that it allows them to use the cursor agent that when they want that part of coding with AI in really any of those editors. And an underrated one is that it can be used in your CI, or it can be used on a server. It can just be used anywhere, really. And that's one of the nice things about taking the brain of the cursor agent and just making it available on any UI surface.
Yeah, so I guess it's easier for people who have their workflow to adapt it rather than switching to a different software. Makes sense. All right, so can we jump into Cursor and can you show us something that you yourself like to do?
I'll just do like a lightning round of some of the features inside of Cursor for people who are maybe newer to the product or are kind of newer to AI coding in general. And then also sprinkle in some things for those who have kind of been around for a while. So I've got just a blank Cursor window open here, and I'm just going to start a new project for this example. I think there's pros and cons of both. The new project is a little bit easier to show in this time frame, but I would say most of the time you're also kind of making changes to an existing code base. The reason I wanted to show this is because one project that I like, Bun, which is runtime, package manager, a whole bunch of stuff. They have this bun init command where you can go pick whatever you want, and we can see it's going to make a bunch of stuff here. Great. Actually, let me make a new directory. Now I'm going to pick React. We'll use that. Sure. Great. So we can see kind of what we have inside of here. That looks awesome. Now you notice it made a .cursor, which is very interesting. Let's actually open this up. Okay. So now, how I mentioned there's kind of the different levels of autonomy you want to give? Like the agents on the right, that's going to allow it to write the most amount of code. We're just going to close that for a minute. And I want to show one thing I like from bun init, which is that it automatically kind of sets up your editor to know about the tool. So it says, hey, here's some of the things that bun provides, some of the APIs it provides, specific code examples of things that you can do. And there's a really interesting one way down at the bottom. It actually ships the API docs in the node modules, which I find really, really interesting. So I think there's going to be a trend where we see more packages, more libraries, more tools include specific rules, bundled in the tooling that sets them up. And then also, I think the industry is starting to move towards a standardization for an agents.md. So Cursor now supports this as well if you don't want to do Cursor-specific rules, so that it will work really with any AI coding tool that you want to use.
Yeah, I think in general there'll be a trend of building code bases for agents. Whether it's Claude MD, whether it's Cursor MDC files, whether it's agent.md, I think it will probably standardize itself, right? But it's going to be like every folder is going to have a markdown file probably that is instructions of what's in that folder, how to use it, when to interact with it, specifically for AI agents, but also it will serve as an internal documentation for new human developers.
Yep, 100%. And I think going back to my kind of autonomy thing, if you haven't seen Cursor tab before, I might do something like function, and it's giving me the ghost text to complete. If you've used Copilot before, you've seen this before. But another cool thing here is, I don't know, let's say I wanted to do, something like this where I'm doing a counter. Now you see I get this suggestion to do an import, and it can tab to include the imports, which is a really nice feature. I'm a big fan of that. So that's like the most basic example where
everyone should use this. For sure.
It's a no-brainer. Like that's going to save you a ton of time.
Even
Another
the biggest
one that
haters.
I think maybe some people, not everybody uses, but if you go highlight some code, you can also Command K, and now you're editing just this specific block. So maybe I want use a picture element instead.
Yeah, I feel like Command K is fallen a bit in the background, don't you think?
Yeah, Command K, I think a lot of people still really like it. I think there's kind of a preference of, do I want to be kind of in the flow of this file writing code, and I just want to make these very surgical, like single changes, or do I want to give the agent the ability to do whatever it wants? So this is like, the way I describe it is the two things I just showed, so doing autocomplete with Cursor tab, doing things with Command K. This is like, I'm not using AI today and I'm wanting to get into it.
Yes.
These are the most like basic practical ways for you to do it where the value add is very high. When you start to then go and you open up the agent view, we've now kind of opened up this new portal of complexity that has a lot of additional challenges with it. So For example, we might say, I'm making a personal finance app to track my spending. Let's add a table to view this data. Sure. Now, already there's just a lot of stuff in here that if this is your first time kind of looking at the tool, you're trying to figure out how all these things work. There's the agent mode, so it can go write code for you. There's the model selection, which there's a lot of different models in here. Maybe I'll just do auto for the sake of this, but you can pick specific models if you would like. You can attach images, great. So now you're kind of setting an AI model off to go do a bunch of stuff, and you're seeing it just have all this output where it's reading files, it's listing files, it's going and making new changes. And this is where I think those who are kind of newer to coding with AI, it can feel really great at first, but this is also where there's kind of some core concepts on here that you need to understand to be successful. The first is that this entire chat, this entire conversation is part of one context window or one conversation. So as I'm asking more questions, as I'm building more, you're going to see at the end of the generation, there's going to be a little progress bar. And as that progress bar gets higher to 100%, usually, and there's some early research showing the quality of the model response usually goes down as you get up to the top of that context window. Now, the next question might be, okay, well then I just need to use the context window that's 1 million tokens or 10 million tokens if that existed. And the answer is kind of more tricky than that. It doesn't actually just magically make things better to have a 2 million or 10 million token context window. Instead, you really want to be precise about the changes that you're making. So just this one change where we said, okay, we want to make this table. It used some tool calls, so it's like calling a function in a programming language. It calls some function and it gets some information back. We read some files, we made some code changes, we applied those code changes, and we can go review the changes. So let me just make this a little smaller. And we can kind of step through with this kind of picker down at the bottom here and go through each of the individual changes. There's also changes in 3 different files. So we have this table component, we have the spending tracker, and then we have the actual changes inside of the app. Now, if all of these look good, I can just hit keep. So this is kind of the flow. Keep, great, awesome. I'll keep all of these. And we used about 11% here of the context window on auto. Now, the thing that I see a lot of people do incorrectly is then they just keep going. There's like, okay, like it's already got all this context. I'm just going to keep make another feature. And that can be problematic because even you might think, okay, there's some information in this context I want to continue along in the next conversation, but it's kind of counterintuitive, but there can be little bits of information in there that accidentally steer the model in the wrong direction. So maybe in one conversation, you mentioned something about using Git and making commits. And then if you keep going, you notice that the model just keeps making commits all the time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you kind of planted that seed in the model's brain and it's using it every single time now. So maybe what I would actually want is to, Command N or start a new chat and actually do something discrete and specific for this one, this one feature I want to add. And there's a whole skill of managing the information that you give to the agent so that it has just the right amount of stuff. Like I mentioned, too much stuff is going to throw it off. But then also, if I just say make it better, that's not enough information. I need to give it some rules, which this is what this is showing. There's a rule included. And then it already knows I have this code open in this tab, so it can include that. But I can also use the @ and include a bunch of different information. One of the underrated ones that I like is branch. So if you've been working on changes for a while, you can say review all the changes in my branch, and it can kind of understand the context of all the changes so far.
So before making a PR, just to clean it up, making sure everything is good before you send it to
Yes, definitely. So we could go in here and we could go make more changes, but I think that's the general idea of you can do autocomplete, you can do inline changes, you can use the agent to make more bits of code, and this is the core editor experience. But then in the CLI, we also have cursor agent, which is the same idea, but you can use it anywhere, really. You can use this in a different editor. You could use it in your CI, anywhere you want. Explain this repo. So I'll run this just so you can get an idea of what this looks like, but it's very similar idea. It's just a different interface for the same agentic idea of working with an AI model. You can change models here just like you can in the cursor editor. And the philosophy of Cursor is we want to allow you to use any model. So as new models come out, which they come out like once
every
a month
week,
at this rate, it seems like,
There's
always new models. They're always going to be trying new things and making improvements. Our goal is to support all of those models and make it very easy to integrate them into your application and get the kind of the best of all of the latest tech.
Yeah, and I feel like the future, as the models get better and more capable, is going to be more heavily about the UI, like reviewing tons of changes, because nobody wants 2,000 lines div and just like insanely difficult to see what the AI did. It's going to be more about like, how do I review this quickly before approving?
Yep. Now the other thing I want to show, like as you're in the process of working through building software, I'm in my editor, I'm making changes, I work with the agent, I say, go add this thing or go add another thing, and I'm working on building the software project. But eventually over time, the project's going to get a little bit bigger. Maybe multiple people are going to work on it, and you're not always going to be directly in your editor. So it was very important for us to take this same cursor agent experience and bring it to a bunch of different places, trying to make every part of building software easier with AI. So let me show a different screen just as an example. One thing that we added recently that maybe not as many people know about is the ability to call the same cursor agent, but from Slack. So on installing the cursor agent, I wanted to make it so that there's a curl command that says, go to cursor.com/install. But if you went to this URL in the browser, I said, let's actually make that just redirect to our marketing page if the user agent is a browser. And our agent, just like we could call it in the editor, we can also call it in Slack, or we can go to cursor.com/agents and call it from there as well. And then it can make a PR for us, and we can go review those changes, make sure everything looks okay, and then merge it. So I'm often making a bunch of changes to Cursor without ever really needing to be in the editor. I can call things from Slack, I can call things from the web, I can call things from a CLI. Some people use like CLIs on their phone. I've seen levels. I talk about this quite a bit, which is fun. And the goal is just to try to bring that agent experience pretty much wherever you're at.
So that kind of nicely ties into the topic of MCPs, right? Because they also make it more integrated, where agents can use different tools or even different agents. So talk about MCPs. What do you see the future there?
I mentioned that the agent has the ability to call tools, and the tools are like reading files or listing files or applying code changes, searching the web. These are all tools that are built in that Cursor or the AI tool is defining. So we're giving the agent, let's call it 10 different really high quality tools.
Yes.
And for some of those tools, by the way, Cursor has our own models that we've trained to be really good at just that one thing. So indexing a code base and searching over a code base and so on. Now, the great thing about MCP is that it allows you to add arbitrary tools into that list. So you can integrate with basically any external system then, whether you write the MCP server or they write the MCP server. And it allows it to have a tool that can go call something. It could be an API, it could be a CLI, it could be anything, and then bring that information back and put it into the context. So going back to what I mentioned, like context management is kind of the key skill, knowing what you're putting in. The size of the context window, making sure it doesn't get too large. When you go call an MCP and you go bring some information back and put it inside of there, that's really helpful context. It can be great for the agent to solve a task or go look at my runtime logs or go look at observability data. All that's great, but then you also need to know those kind of foundational concepts you're building on, like the context size, what are tool calls, how does that grow over time. So the future of MCP for me, I think is there's kind of two different modes. There's people using MCPs with AI chats, like ChatGPT on the web or something, which this is like, it's more of a connector of things. It's basically integrations. So I can connect to my Google Drive account and go pull information from there. That's fine. I think there's some security things there that are tricky. There's already been some cases where you have to be very careful about giving the model access to all of your Google Drive and Google email account because models can hallucinate and they maybe would get something wrong, or they might run a command that accidentally deletes something in your Google Drive. So I'm much more of a read-only MCP person for like most things. Like reading stuff is mostly fine. It's the writing stuff you have to be a lot more careful of, which is why in Cursor, like when you're in the agent, you can allow or deny specific commands that you want to give the MCP the ability to use. So that's like more of the consumer side. On the developer side, the MCP use cases I'm excited about are tools and frameworks and companies making MCP servers that make it easier for models to ingest data about that product. So maybe it's the runtime logs or the observability data or the account information. Just getting that information back into the MCP server such that when you're trying to debug an issue and it's some kind of runtime error, you can say, okay, let's go look at X account and figure out what went wrong. And it can go to Sentry or something, for example. And go to Sentry, it can look at all the errors that have happened. It can pull that into the context. And generally the model does a better job of kind of finding that information in a stream of just raw logs than it would take for a human to find that.
So last question I want to ask is, if you had to leave the next generation of software engineers with one piece of advice, what would that be?
I think that it's uncomfortable for experienced developers to see this new wave of tools coming and feel like it's kind of changing what it means to be a software engineer. And they want to dismiss it and kind of push it away, or they're kind of ignored, or they're kind of ignoring it, or they're just upset about the hype around AI. But I think that this next generation is going to be very AI native, AI first. They're starting learning using these tools.
Yeah.
This is kind of the way that they know how to build software, which has pros and cons, but I think they can learn the downsides of that approach probably faster than people who've been coding for 20 years and are kind of reluctant to try this out are going to be able to get a feel for how working with models actually is. So I would say for those kind of getting into coding right now, the next generation, it's both important to really understand how models work, kind of become proficient as these tools get better and better, but also you can't skip the foundations. You're
Yes.
going to get into a spot where the model's wrong and you say, okay, go fix it. Okay, it doesn't actually work. And you say, no, go fix that again. And you just get into this cycle where it's kind of just busted. And unless you have a deeper understanding of how to debug software and some of the core principles, it could be kind of frustrating. So I would highly recommend both becoming AI native, but also go learn the CS foundations.
Yeah, you have to be willing to get your hands dirty. And I think the biggest leverage is really upskilling yourself, because the models are going to get better, AI tools are going to get better, and if you yourself use them to improve your programming experience, you're just going to outperform everybody else.
Yeah, 100%.
Radley, I appreciate the time. So what should people do? Should they follow you on Twitter? Should they check out Cursor?
Yeah, I am posting about building with AI, coding with AI on Twitter at LeeRob. And then also we're releasing a course on how to use AI. Cursor it'll be free. It'll be online at cursor.com/learn in the coming weeks or month, or maybe already available when you watch this video.
Awesome. So again, thank you for taking the time and have a great day.
Thank you.